Now I love Marco. He's the guy that's in charge of it. He's a friend of mine. But yeah, I think he even knows it's a little unorganized. It's just how he is, the kind of person he is, really like easygoing. But that's kind of also the beauty of it. So as long as you can find like a good place to stay, you have some friends that you know are going, you hang with them. It's actually a really good time because what it does is it puts you in like a really beautiful city in a foreign land with a bunch of awesome artists from all around the world, and you just hang out and drink and socialize and have a great time for about like a week. THU is the same kind of deal. The difference is that one's more organized. That's kind of the difference, essentially. And so, hold on just a second. And so like if you think about what's a good investment, like that's probably a really good one. But it's also one of the more expensive things you can go to. So, but the ones in America, there are some really good ones here. But there's also some ones in Europe. I think GDC is not as good as it used to be. What's a really good one here in the States that even I go to? I mean, I think GDC is one of my favorite ones that I go to. CTN used to be, but it's not anymore. And I only went to CTN just to hang out with people. It was never really just for anything else than that. I had a booth there once, but it just was a mess. And then there's like DesignerCon, there's WonderCon, there's some of these really big events that's just really hard to kind of connect with people, like what you call it, Comic-Cons. But there's like smaller ones. There's all kinds. Like doing your own research is probably going to be helpful. But the ones that are more industry focused are actually overseas. Like some of them that are really good. For instance, the one that is really good in Europe is industry workshops. That one's pretty cool. From what I've heard, it's pretty great. Some of the ones that my students run are pretty good. There's one in Toronto called Nonstop. It's Nonstop Barcelona. That's one in Spain. But then there's the one that's in Toronto that's Edge Control by my former students. They really got that on lockdown. That one's a really good event of theirs that they do. Yeah, I mean, it's overall just a good experience to just go to places and begin the train of networking. But if I wish I could go to THU to give you some perspective, but it's super expensive even for myself. But it's more along the lines of that I also have a big family, and it's really hard for my wife. When I'm gone, I help her out a lot. And so that's just something to consider. And yeah, hopefully that helps you out. But there's a lot. You should just really look into it. There's plenty. Just give it some thought. Any other questions?
What are you drawing?
I'm thinking of like this design that I have for a game idea that I'm making.
Oh, cool.
And so it's like this maze, giant kind of maze of a game, and like in the very traditional sense. Yeah, Buff Bunny. So I'm thinking of like the Minotaur, right? But then I'm trying to make it so like, yeah, I started feeling it looked like a bunny too, so that's why I've tried to change the design a little bit.
Is that why you're getting into like learning C# and such?
I already know C# pretty well at a very novice level. I wouldn't say that I'm like some sort of crazy programmer, but like I know it enough that I can make shit in Unity. Okay. But then I started learning Unreal again. I started learning blueprints, and that's been fun.
How different are they?
They're pretty different.
Okay. So is it easily is the skill transferable at the very least?
So one thing that I really spend a lot of my time and effort in, and the things that I learn, I try to find things that are fundamentally true for the things that I try to get better at. So for instance, with video games, or so let's go to art. Actually, let's start with art. With art, it's like learning perspective, design, proportions, anatomy, all of these types of things, right? Because if I'm in a 3D software, I could probably still make these things work. You know, I can make something look pretty reasonable. Do you understand? Because I have like a strong fundamental knowledge of these things. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think from an art perspective, I can easily put two and two together. When it comes to like on the programming end, like game development in general, like when it comes to essential foundational knowledge like game design and understanding like game flow, that kind of thing, I can definitely kind of like start piecing the pieces together. But when it comes to coding, like I'm just thinking like, oh, should it be C#, or is there like a more fundamental language that I can kind of like look up?
So again, getting back to like my thought. So just let me kind of just like lay this all out for you, okay? And then I think you'll be able to do this what I'm trying to get at overall, okay? And so that with art, like it was like that. Like that was the defining features that I was trying to figure out, right? Like what are those things? And I figured out that's what those things were. And I put a lot of my investment and time into those things, and it paid out in dividends, okay? So then let's take something else. Like let's say like weight training, you know? Something else that I'm pretty reasonably good at, right? So fundamentals, what's the core of that? Well, you know, moving objects from one spot to another, you know? It's fundamentally what you got to do for weight training. But how do you increase strength and power? So, you know, there's some foundational movements. Like if you can do a lot of some of the most powerful compound movements, like a deadlift, a squat, bench press, pull-ups, bent over rows, right? Some of these movements that require a lot of other muscles, right? And they're also kind of like a natural movement of your body. And you put a lot of strength and effort into these specific things to try to get better at, right? That like all sorts of other workouts tend to be easier, okay?
Definitely.
And you start to and on top of that you should improve like, you know, cardiovascular stuff. So you should do like cardio and stuff like that so you have stronger heart. And then ultimately you get really good at that, okay? And you'll be better at weight training, okay? So then let's take something like, you know, a diet, like eating right. Or let's take something like music, about like finding the right chord progressions and the basic, you know, progression of making a good song. Like what is the order in which good songs are made, right? What I'm getting at is I always try to find the core principles, because I might not know what they are at the beginning, just kind of like you were positioning just a moment ago, right? Like, you know, you just don't see it, but that's just natural. But what the advice that I'm giving, the advice that I'm giving is that you should always seek what those foundations may be, okay? And so I preface all this because I still don't know if I know what those are, okay? But I know I'm closer. So for instance, you're asking something like C#. Is that something that's a foundational language that I should learn? That is equivalent to, should I do 2D or should I do 3D?
Okay, I should have framed my question better, because I understand where you're getting at, and I think it's kind of like an extension of what you were talking about earlier, about like, you know, like gathering reference and all that.
Yes.
Yes, and I understand the core of the question. I guess what I really meant was that I would love to compare notes, because do you personally hesitate or refrain from sharing like how you would approach things, because you would encourage your students to figure out by themselves?
Oh yeah, definitely, because everyone's different.
Okay, that's good enough, because I was kind of just curious, and I just wanted to kind of see if like if the direction that sorry, not the direction, the solutions that I personally came up with, if it's like, I don't know, I just wanted confirmation bias, I guess, to be completely honest.
Yeah, sure.
Is my mentor kind of going on a similar path, and I at least feel a little bit more comfort in that knowledge that hey, okay, so we can kind of be in the same boat, as it were. But
Yeah.
if you think that is kind of like not helpful.
Oh no, I actually will tell you what I know. I like to give more practical and pragmatic solutions before I give just kind of, it's the whole give a person a fish, you feed him for a day, but if you teach a person how to fish, you feed him for a lifetime.
Absolutely, and I totally agree with that sentiment.
Yeah, so I started with teaching how to fish. So now I'm going to give you the fish. The things that I believe are fundamental for programming as it stands is like learning how to do really good algorithms. I think
algorithms, yes.
Yeah, like actually being able to come up with creative and clever functionalities and methods. That's the heart of like good programming, in my opinion.
Right. That's basically what I was getting at, and I guess when I mentioned C#, I guess it's just kind of like, hey, so do you use Photoshop or Studio?
Yeah, it's the wrong type of question to the answer that you're looking for. Right, because if I were to just say yes, I use C#, that doesn't help you anyway. It literally does not, because you might go in there, right, and you might just be like, "What in the world?"
Okay, well, I'll give you my story why I asked that question. Is that
go for it.
You're coming from like a very similar position where you started as an artist and you're getting into. Well, I'm going to assume you got into programming after you got into art.
I actually started as a programmer, and then I went to.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because I wasn't any good at it. And then I saw people drawing, and I was like, "Oh, that looks cool." So then I did that instead. I'm making this guy too complicated.
Okay.
And then time went on. And now I'm like, "Oh yeah, I want to learn programming again."
Here's kind of like the context of what I was asking, because I would do like a study, and I thought, hey, I think nerves are pretty cool. Maybe I should invest in nerves. And then somebody from the industry would say, "Oh no, you don't want to do that. Nerves are gonna you're not gonna get practical." Like you're not going to get like good results of what you're going for. In my context, I want to work in the industry and I want to learn 3D art in the context of like practical 3D game development environment. Or similar other story was I was looking into XNA at the time and said, hey, XNA is really cool. There was a game that came out by this one guy who worked on the XNA. And then when I mentioned that to one of my teachers at the time, he kind of grabbed me and said, you should really try and invest in Unity. So in that similar context, I was wondering if C# was kind of like a beginner-friendly way.
So both the people that gave you advice gave you bad advice.
You think so?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they did.
I think they.
You're still asking the wrong questions.
Okay, fair enough.
No, I'm not saying that they did it intentionally. They were trying to help you, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they gave you bad advice because they were focused on the tools. And if you keep chasing tools, you'll never catch up.
Right.
You just won't. It's just reality. Mm-hmm. If it's not Unity today, it might be some other engine.
Right. That's totally fair.
They're literally Python is starting to become really popular and really used, and it might eventually be used for more game engines. It just takes one person to create that game engine, and then they make using Python, and Python is already pretty popular and a lot more intuitive. In a lot of ways, because the way you code with Python is almost like writing, like you're writing a sentence. Okay, which is a lot more intuitive. That's why a lot of people use it. This is why a Blender has caught up much quicker to some of these heavy hitters in the 3D development engines, right? Or tools. I mean,
Python, that's right.
Yeah. So that's what I'm trying to say is if you're chasing tools, dude, you wanna avoid that.
Okay.
You should learn tools, right? You should learn how to use as many tools as you can. But you'll be better off on a foundational understanding of how the core principle stuff. Okay? Because eventually there's going to be tools that are so good and so intuitive and so easy to use. For instance, let's say making a 3D object, right? There's going to be some tools out there that are going to come out in like the next decade. They're just going to be so intuitive, you know, like making like a cool 3D character or sci-fi environment or whatever the hell you want to make is going to be so easy to do, right? But if you don't know how to fucking make these things, it won't matter how easy the tool is. Just like if you have a power drill, doesn't mean you now know how to make antique architecture. Do you get my point?
Absolutely. I
Right.
guess, yeah, I mean, I was kind of like running like a different scenario, and it makes perfect sense. Like you can ask like, what type of martial arts should I pick up? And it
Mhm.
doesn't matter if you don't understand like the underlying principles, or what kind of gun should I own? And then like doesn't matter if can you be a good shot,
Yes,
Yes, okay.
exactly right. And I think there's a fair case to say that tools are valuable as well, right? I used to have a little bit more of a kind of like a naive stance on it, because it's one of those things like when you discover something, that's like all you want to talk about, and you become like this kind of religious zealot for it, you
Sure,
know?
and
So
that's
for
like one of
instance,
the
like when I learned that like tools really aren't the solution, and that was like all I was talking about, and I would make fun of people that would constantly ask the kinds of questions that you're asking, right? Like in the earlier days,
Okay.
right?
Look, I'm glad I didn't meet you back then.
Yeah. There's even like a very popular joke from one of my older streams where I was talking about this, like where I'd be like, yeah, people always ask me like what brush I use. And what brush that be? What brush that be? What brush you using, my man? And I used to make that voice and that kind of character. And then people like, that was funny. Because I was trying to like make fun of like this idea that like the brush is what makes the artist, right?
Right.
But as I got better and as I had more time to meet more individuals and see artists who do use like all sorts of different kinds of really interesting tools and brushes, and they get really great results, and they realize like, oh, okay, well, like fundamentally what I'm trying to say is like at a very early stage in your development, if you're focused on the tools, that's the wrong focus. Okay. But as you become more and more established and you become more skilled, then the tools start to have more relevance. Okay. Now it's the difference between giants. You get what I'm saying?
Sure.
Right? Like if you look at like Olympic athletes, like literally the types of shoes that they wear make a big difference. Okay. But at that Olympic level, you hear what I'm getting at?
I think you're trying to say is that like probably I should learn to walk before I just decide to run.
Like if you were to say, if I were to put this in the context of the Olympic running, right? It's like you're asking the kind of stuff like, well, what kind of gym does Usain Bolt like work out at, right?
Right, doesn't matter.
Where you still can't finish running a mile.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, let's wait. Let's hold off on the gym question. Let's just see if you can even finish a mile, right?
Sure.
And then once you finish the mile and you build like fundamental understanding of core strength to be an Olympic runner, then like you're at that high echelon of skill, then these types of questions actually become more relevant. Then you can see, oh yeah, he trains at this kind of specific regiment. He does like a push pull lift or push pull leg day thing, and that helps with his strength and his explosiveness. That kind of stuff then starts to become way more relevant. So that's why I try to I don't downplay the whole asking what the tools kind of questions are. But what I try to do is instead try to help them understand, kind of like what I'm doing now. I think you already understand. You got it pretty quickly, which is that ultimately you want to focus on core principled ideas. And if you don't know what those are right now, that's fine. That's totally fair. It's hard to figure out, especially if you're a complete noob at it. But if you happen to know somebody that knows this type of stuff, you should definitely ask them, right? So for instance, that's what I did. I had a programmer friend who I believe was one of the best programmers I've ever worked with. Because whenever I would say, hey, it would be a cool idea, like if you did this or that and that and this, and he's like, that is a cool idea. I'll put it in. And he would put it in like literally an hour later, and
those are the best.
Yeah, and I'm like, what the hell? And then now as I learn programming, I understand kind of why other programmers would have like a hissy fit about that kind of stuff. Because usually they'll build their code on like a house of cards. And when you make that suggestion, it's like they have to reconstruct that house of cards essentially,
Yeah.
And so that's really hard to do. So then they, instead of just saying that what it is, they just say, oh, we can't do that. You know nothing about coding, you like idiotic concept artist, right? And so but now that I know, now I can see through their lies. But that made me respect someone like my buddy Ray, who's like a great programmer, right? Because I realized that he was able to build epic house of cards that were really flexible, very malleable, you know? And so I asked him, and he said something along the lines of what I just said, like it's all about the algorithms. Another thing he said is like state machines, like getting really good at state machines, like determining states of things. Like a good example of this is your object jumping, okay, versus falling, versus landing, versus moving, and be able to build a really good like system, which they call like a state machine, that will determine, depending on your state, it will determine what is happening with your objects. So I took that seriously because I respect him, and he's right. I see a lot of what he was talking about as I get better and better at programming.
He said state machines, and the other one was
algorithms.
Algorithm, yes, thank you.
Like here's a great example of just like a very simple algorithm, basically an equation. So there was something like I was trying to find the distance between 2 points, right? Which I believe they call it the vector, which is the length and the direction, right? And so I was trying to figure out what this was, and it's really hard to determine, right? And so there's a few ways that you could do this. One of the ways that I realized that works really well is the Pythagorean theorem that you learned in geometry class. Right? That's basically, you just find the hypotenuse, right? And so you just get the x coordinates, and then you get the y coordinate, and then you get the x coordinate, and then you get the y coordinate, right? And essentially what you do is then you take the x1 and x2, or actually I think it's x2, x1. You have to determine this first. And once you determine that, then you can get this value here. You get the height. And then you do the same thing with the, I'm sorry, I did it backwards. That's for the width, right? And then y is for the height. And then once you have that, then you can do the theorem. I believe it's a, which is right here, a to this, is it cubed? I forget. I think it's cubed. If it's not, it's fine. It'll be corrected immediately. And it's like that, right? And you just plug it in, and each of these are represented through these values, right? And then bam, you find the distance. So all you got to do is create an algorithm that basically solves the Pythagorean theorem using these vertices and this vertices to determine the width and the height, and then you put all that shit in. When I learned that that's why you should learn math, is to understand basic physics and ways to measure distance and arcs and orbits, like stuff that we take for granted. Okay.
For sure, absolutely.
It makes you fucking elite, even though it's really basic, like basic trigonometry and geometry alongside like basic linear algebra and calculus. If you want to get really good, like you want to like some high level calculus and high level trigonometry, that will allow you to control graphics as well, like how things actually look. I'm not at that level, but I was getting there. I was talking to my friend. I was like, I could probably make a VR 3D engine that can create like cool 3D assets. But then I was like, I don't really want to do that. It's a lot of effort that I don't actually want to do. I want to make cool stuff. I don't want to make tools.
That's the conundrum, isn't it? Like you want to be efficient, so you need the tools, but it's not fun to make tools. I mean, for some it's fun. But.
No, I was thinking like straight up just making tools, like a 3D software.
Right, that's crazy.
Yeah, I don't want to do that, even though I was realizing I was capable of doing it.
That's really cool. So you're
on
a very high level when it comes to both coding.
No, I wouldn't say I'm at a high level. I'm just saying that I realize that I can do it. Like I can see the horizon where before I couldn't see it at all.
All right. I mean, I think most people would probably say that it's.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think you're right. Yeah. But my point is that like I'm at a very novice level in general, but like it was enough confidence to make me feel that I could even build one. But then as I was doing it, I was like, nah, never mind. I don't want to do this. This is incredibly boring. Well, I
Sorry,
guess
I kind
it's
of
more
like.
fun to make like things that shoot at and jump around at, you know?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's as far as I would like to learn how to code.
Yeah.
Sorry, I kind of flooded this.
No, that's fine.
Where it should be more about.
Yeah, we'll move on. But ultimately, what I'm trying to get across, to like the fundamentals, guys, is like one of the biggest things that you can try to learn, and most things that you want to try to get really good at. If you can figure out what those are, for whatever it is, you'll help yourself tremendously.
Yeah, just to kind of give you some context is that I've been tasked recently at work to kind of like start filling in the role of a technical artist. So it's just kind of been like filling my mind in this recent weeks.
Yeah. So the first thing you should do with tools, you should just learn how the tools work. But then once you start to learn how the tools work, you should try to do some really basic stuff. Like for instance, like if you're using Unity, right?
Yes.
Like try to make a first person movement as like your ultimate goal, all on your own, like without looking at any reference. Okay, that means you will have a really core understanding of like the tool, you understand the math of it, and that puts you at a pretty good level. You can do a lot of things if you can make something move at a first person like perspective, right? But obviously you have to start somewhere. So the first thing before that is like, just can you make an object move in general? By pressing a button, will a cube go up? If you can do that, then all right, great. You graduate from that, try to make the cube go up and down by different buttons.
Right.
Okay, make the cube rotate. Make the cube scale. Keep doing that. And then again, the whole object is to never be able to try not to use reference often, and so that way it's internalized knowledge. But like you can do it if you don't know. Like if you say, what was that thing? And then just look it up and then get the answer, and then just do it again and again and again until you stop having to look it up. And this is exactly what I was talking to Alex about. Like, you just got to get in this habit of finding solutions and quantifying your progress. You can't relate. And one thing that I was saying to him is you shouldn't have to get permission to improve. Like you shouldn't have someone else validate your improvement. You should just do it, right? And then take the sage advice of others to help you kind of move along better when you have a different frame of mind and context. Like if the kinds of questions that you ask when you're at a higher level are way more valuable than what I hear sometimes at the lower level. Like a good question that I would like that I hear from time to time that I'll kind of preface with is something along the lines of like whenever people are struggling with their designs and they've done already a lot of good designs, but they say to me something along the lines of, I feel that my designs aren't as good, basically aren't as good as my idols, right? What can I do to improve that? That's a good question because it feels like you've reached the end of the road. And then I usually answer, well, you have to do incremental increases. So maybe you should look at kinds of artists that are a little bit below them and see if you can reach them. Or you should study that person's artwork. Like a scientist would study the surface of a planet, right? Because you may never hear them talk about their process. So you should just study the shit out of anything that have available. Find sketches of theirs so you can see early stages of how they get the drawing going, Because that's a pretty good question because usually those people are at a different level. Now, I didn't say copying. I said something completely different. I mean, copying can be part of the process. I think that's fair. But copying isn't the process.
I remember the video that you linked to us. Yeah. So
yeah.
I'm putting that to heart.
Yeah, it's not part, it can be part of it, but it is not the process. What I said, again, just to repeat, is that you should really understand and research and find as many examples of the person's work and just study it like a scientist would study it. Try to replicate the image for your own study purposes. Yeah, absolutely. You should try to replicate it. But copying implies that you have it in front of you and you're just looking at it and then moving pixels from one image to another image. But in that other context that you just wrote, it could be said that you turn off whatever reference that you have in front of you, and then just try to go from muscle memory or memory from your previous observations. That will help you improve. Just like I was just saying to Mackenzie, right? Like about how when you're doing like Unity, like move an object, and ultimately you want to get to the point where you can, let's say, create a first-person movement of a character, right? Without like opening up a website or a blog or whatever, you know? Because that means you memorized and internalized enough information that you really understand it. Does this make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah. And the same applies to like art, obviously. That's like I've done the same thing with art. Like I've tried to understand and study. Yeah, this is gonna be hard to move. I'm just gonna get rid of that. I was trying to think of ways to make it cool, but then I realized I don't want to animate that. If this is a character design I'm gonna make, like actually make like 3D version of it. Yeah, F that. It's a lot. Put all the cool horn stuff on the top, then it's much easier. I can make it as crazy as I want and just all have it pivot off of the neck. That'll work.
I have a question.
Yeah, man, go for it.
So when you were learning art, you didn't work as a concept artist yet,
No.
but you decided that you wanted to be one, right? How do you remember that stage? Like,
Oh yeah, it was pretty simple. I was a loser. I didn't really have a job or anything. I was like almost about to live out of my car. So I had to find like a solution to my problems. So then I ended up going to school. And then I used the opportunity to go to school to try to obtain some sort of, career. And then when I went to school, I ended up seeing that concept art was a job. Because I originally went as a programmer. Like I made the joke about like how I was racist towards myself that I thought I could learn math,
yeah,
or that I was good at math because I'm Asian, whatever. Right? It was a joke, but it was true. I kind of was like, because I was pretty good at math. I was reasonable at it, right? But then it was really hard and it was more work than I was expecting. But what really turned me off of it was that there was an alternative career that seemed way more creative, which was art, concept art.
mm-hmm.
So then I decided to do that instead. And that's pretty much it. And I decided it. And as soon as I saw that it was a thing, I decided that's way cool. I want to do that. And then once I started, I was like, yeah, this is way more interesting. I want to do this for sure. And then,
right.
And I just stuck with it until I became it.
But how do you remember that part of, like, if you look back, how do you see yourself back then from this point? You know what I mean?
No, I'm not entirely sure. Try to explain or ask the question in a different way, if you don't mind.
All right. Like, how do you remember you feeling, like basically feeling, or the experience of learning? How did you live the experience of learning on your own once you realized this was a job opportunity? Am I making sense? Or
so the way that I felt then,
yeah,
is irrelevant to the answer that I think you're looking for. Okay.
What's the answer you think I'm looking for?
That if I had like very similar feelings to many of you guys, right? Like if some of your guys' suspicions or insecurities could be validated, that like I was also nearly as afraid for my future. Like I think this is deep rooted to what you're trying to get at, right?
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it's just a guess, but I'm pretty sure I'm on top of what I think I'm right, but I could be wrong. But ultimately, because I'm going to tell you my answer, and we'll see how you feel. Okay.
Yeah.
And I felt the same as I do today. Nothing's changed. In fact, I got less fulfilled as I got more successful.
Oh, yeah.
Does it help you?
Yeah, I think I was just curious, you know?
Okay.
See,
Yeah. So let me try to give you an answer that I think will actually be more satisfying. Okay. And we'll see how it goes. All right. So the reason why I say I feel the same because I've done nothing different. Okay. I've always picked the thing that I was really interested in, and I just would put a lot of effort into it. Right. When I was a kid, I played in a band, and we took it very seriously. I took it very seriously. We toured. We did all concerts. We had CDs. If this was during the time of YouTube, we might have actually been successful. We might have done something. But if you've ever been in a band, the band is like really, it's really like not as reliable as you would hope because you're relying on other people to also carry the weight, right?
Yeah.
It's the same conundrum that I have right now with game development. It's really hard to rely on other people. Okay, it just is unless they're getting paid. And so I was like, I took it upon myself just to learn how to program. Okay. Because game development has gotten to the point where, yeah, you know what? I can just do it on my own.
Sure.
You know, I probably can.
Yeah.
And so I felt the same. Like when I was learning, when I was playing video games like World of Warcraft, I took it like pretty seriously. I was pretty religiously good at that game as well. I played it a lot. Okay. So nothing has changed. Like I am the same way. Like it's not entirely true. Like I have obviously changed in different ways, but the ways that I've changed are just basically I am more committed to my like basically to my thought about how to improve. I am vindicated throughout based off of throughout my own experiences and seeing the experiences of others. Okay. Yeah. So when I tell you guys it's just take some time and effort and get your name out there, that works. I'm not saying that lightly. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So an answer that I think was a little more I'll answer I think a little more satisfying, perhaps more satisfying for your peers too, perhaps, is that I knew people that were in this situation. I had a friend who was really aggro all the time. He would always look at other things as the culprit to the reason why he wasn't succeeding. Mm-hmm. And then one day we all had a field trip to go to a game studio, me and a couple other guys, and he didn't get to go. And he was like, well, why can't I go? And well, the counselor at the time was like, because you're shitty. She didn't say it like that, but she's pretty much saying that, right?
Yeah.
She almost kind of laughed at him, at the idea that he thought he could even go, right?
Yeah.
Because he just didn't do anything. He used to play Street Fighter a lot and whatever. So then at the time, he realized I need to like change my attitude. So then he began to hustle. He began to hustle. And then now he's doing great. You know, he even worked for ILM at some point, which was a really big studio. Okay.
Yeah.
And so the reason why that story is a little bit more effective is because, you know, it's like the whole idea that he had like a whole different perspective on it, and he had lack of confidence in himself. And then when he stopped being like that, he was able to do something about it. Right. See, the difference between me and him is that I'm incredibly confident, even if I'm really bad.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? And I realize that that's actually very rare. That it's not very common. Most people have a lot more insecurities than I do. I have my own insecurities, but I have very little. Okay? And I'm not saying that that's a good thing. I think ultimately it can get you in trouble. Okay? But when it comes to getting good at stuff, it is like a superpower. Because whenever I would be bad at art, I would just be like, well, just gotta fucking draw more. I would never doubt myself. I would never doubt my abilities. I would never, I never felt I couldn't do it. I just said, I'll just do it. And I know not everybody thinks this way, right? Some people will have imposter syndrome. Some people have anxiety issues. You know, people second guess themselves all the time. And so my advice usually for these situations is like, well, were you better than you were 5 years ago? And the answer is almost always yes. And I say, see, you improved.
Yeah,
it's all in your head, my man. You know, and if like the way that I think about the world is wildly different, right? Like I feel that people around the world are capable of being great artists in general. I think humans, our natural skill as an animal is creativity.
Yeah.
But we're still animals, so we're lazy as fuck.
Yeah.
By default. Okay? Because most animals are lazy. Okay? Most animals just sit around sleeping, eating, and trying to have sex with everything else. Right? That is most animal behavior. Rarely do you see any other animal that does like extraordinary amounts of effort other than like maybe worker ants, right? Or other insects of that kind, right?
Yeah.
But even then, they're very simple. They don't have a lot going for them. Like that's all they do. It's incredibly systematic, right? Humans are unique in this feature in a lot of ways because we, at one level, are really capable of being like a worker ant, like really working as a unit, like a large unit of a body, and create extraordinary things as a group, right?
Yep.
But we're also just want to sit down and play video games all day and watch Netflix. You know, the majority does. This is why Netflix is a thing. That's why they make a lot of money. You know, and so you have to understand that you're fighting against your natural instincts. You understand?
Yeah.
A lot of people are. And for whatever reason, those natural instincts aren't as strong like they are in others. Okay?
Sure.
But I have no doubt that those instincts can be override. Because I know people that have overridden them. Okay?
Yeah, I think I did.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I knew already what you're saying because I did stuff you were talking about, gym, workout, and I'm pretty good at that. You know,
Oh yeah.
I know how to go to the gym, how to bulk up, how to like what I need to do what I want.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like, I do, and that builds confidence.
Same with sports. Like I've done soccer, I've done American football, rugby, and I'm pretty good at learning that stuff. But you were the first guy that I heard talking about art and drawing and painting, not as a talent.
Yeah.
You know,
not as something that you're born with.
Yeah, at least the first person that made sense in that way. You know
yep,
I mean?
Because it is a physical ability. People just like you have to think about it like humans invented the idea of mentality versus physicality. Right? Like the idea that our brain is separate from our body.
Yeah.
But the reality is our brain is part of our body. It's another body part. It literally is. It's just another physical thing, right? And it's like you said, like I understand that. And once you understand that as well, then it becomes much easier to try to get better at it. I say much easier. I'm not saying that it's easy, but easier. Because then you stop thinking of it as some sort of magical, mystical thing. You know, you start seeing it as another physical skill. The reason why weight training and like sports and all these other things that are a little like again defined like to be more physical are easier to get better at in general, it's because ultimately you can see the results rapidly, right? They're very clear. Where trying to get better at art there's so many things that you need to get better at
Mhm.
that it can get lost amongst the flurry of things to get better at. That's why
Yeah.
you should just pinpoint one problem at a time and try to solve it. Like when I was talking about the programming thing with McKinsey, it's the same thing, right? Like I said, you need to like have a larger goal. Okay, make a first person movement all on your own without looking, right? Just all from your own personal memory.
Yeah.
But first start by, moving a cube. Can you move a cube? Right?
Yeah.
So that would be like the same thing. The equivalent of this would be like, okay, I want to be able to deadlift 2 plates on each side, right? But the first thing I need to do is perfect my form on the deadlift in general. So I'll start with light weights. So,
Sure.
and then you pound by pound every week. And then you try to do accessory workouts to help strengthen. Like maybe you do lat pull downs to increase your lats. You do hamstring exercises to strengthen your hamstrings. So
Yep.
that way your deadlift becomes stronger indirectly, right, through other workouts
Mhm.
that focus on those very specific muscles. And then one day you'll do 2 plates. And then once you get there, you make another goal.
Sure.
Right? So, now I'm going to do 4 plates. Obviously, there comes a point where you can't go anymore just because of physics. But you understand what I'm getting at.
Yep.
But with the brain, it's like the opposite. I'm sure there's also physical limitation, but it seems like an endless pit. Like there's so much that a human mind can maintain in terms of the
Yeah.
scope of what we can learn that we have available to us. It's
Yeah.
kind of cool.
It's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Do you think doing something else, like trying to learn something hard as like becoming good as a good artist or a good programmer, do you think it's because I came with the idea that I think it's pretty good to do something else. Like I decided I want to go back to rugby. I haven't done it in 10 years, but I think not only for the challenge, but I think it's good also for the brain as a reminder that everything is hard. Everything is a challenge if you don't do it, at least the beginning. I'm also learning guitar, how to play the guitar.
So out of the two, I think guitar is the best to learn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because guitar it's been proven, I think, through research and science that learning a musical instrument is incredibly valuable to your ability to speak between both hemispheres of your brain.
Sure.
Because you have one side of your brain that's more on the creative side, on the more spontaneous type of thinking, and on the other side of your brain is more calculated, more formulated and logical, right? And so with music, you have to keep with the beat, which is a more rhythmic and logical part of your brain working. Yeah. But then also you need to try to create and be able to hear the patterns of good rhythm and sounds together. And that relies on more on the creative side. And sure enough, if you look at some of the greatest minds, many of them played instruments.
Yeah.
Like Einstein, for instance, played the violin.
Violin, yeah. Yeah, that's without knowing exactly why I thought that could help.
Yeah, I would say that would be the best. The rugby would just be more for physical health. It doesn't necessarily... Yeah, doesn't necessarily help you become a better concert artist. The reason why it would help you out would be because it would make you physically more healthy, which would make your brain more healthy. So it'll make it easier for you to learn new things and stuff like this.
Yeah, that's
something that's something that's indirect, but that actually could help you as a concept artist is definitely learning a musical instrument. Yeah. You know, because it'll make you more creative and logical at the same time. Like you'd really be able to do that. Mm-hmm. That might contribute to why I'm the way I am too, because I used to play musical instruments when I was a kid. I played since I was 16 years old. You know? Sure. And so that could have helped. I don't deny that. I think there could have been a lot of help there. This is probably why a lot of Asian kids do really well, because they're all like forced to learn piano. You know?
Again with the stereotypes, huh? But math, music.
It's not a stereotype. It's just the reality. A lot of Asian folk play musical instruments. That is.
I feel bad not continuing through. I told my mother that I don't want to do this anymore, and now I'm paying the price.
But see, you went through the gauntlet, didn't you? Like whether you committed to it, that's a whole different story. But it was definitely offered to you. I think this next generation, especially in America, it might not happen as much. But definitely my generation, we were hands like fed, like you gotta learn musical stuff.
That's cool.
But it is a stereotype because obviously not every Asian person that you'll run into knows how to play piano. But I'm just saying, like if you went to Korea and people around my age, if you asked them if they knew how to play piano, they probably would say yes.
I don't know. Is it a
Or not piano, but like a violin or something like that.
Violin.
I don't know if it's a stereotype. I think it's true. Every Korean that I know.
That's what I was trying to say to Matthias. Is like I don't think it is a stereotype either. I think it's just a reality.
I mean, maybe we're not all good at it, but we definitely like it.
Yeah, and I'm saying that my kids may not necessarily have this attribute, because I don't necessarily push them on it. But the more research I read on them, I'm like, I kind of should. Like, there's some merit to it, and so like I just need to be better about it so it doesn't feel like I'm forcing them.
Well, the common phrase is "You'll thank me later."
Yeah. And so, but there's some really good research about it, so it's pretty reliable. And so that's all I'm saying. That's the only reason why I'll do it. Just like I'd feed my kids greens, you know what I mean? Because it's clearly good for you. And so, yeah, that would be my advice. You can look into it yourself. You can look into the research. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm missing something. But yeah, physical health is important too. So I'm basically saying like that there's a real defining, like there's a reason why we define these things differently, but ultimately it's all part of one large unit of a body, and if you see it as a large unit, as in like if your physical health is good, then your mental health will be better too, because we separate it to understand cognitive thought versus like physical action, but ultimately like that they're all kind of connected, because it is all just one body. It's working as one large unit. They're starting to discover that like the microbiome, like in your gut, basically like the bacteria that lives in your gut, can affect brain function as well, And so it's like stuff like this, like they're just realizing like, why would it be separate? They're living inside of you. It's like cohabitants,
Yeah, I've been eating differently just because of that. Listening Joe Rogan and Rhonda Patrick, those guys.
Yeah, I know Joe Rogan. I'm not sure who the other person is.
Dr. Rhonda Patrick. She goes a lot.
Oh yeah, I know who she is. Yeah.
Then they talk about a lot about that. It's pretty good. So yeah, like I don't know where I'm going.
All right. I get what you're saying, but yes, I have heard some of those thoughts. Yes. All right. I'm gonna roll on now, guys. I think we've had a good amount of discussions. If you guys have more questions, it's okay. We have more Q&As. No big deal. So with that, you guys have a great weekend. I appreciate you guys' hard work. You guys kicked some butt. Some serious butt has been kicked. I'm very proud of all the progress that you guys have made. Great job. See you guys next week.
Thank you.
Peace out, friends. Thank you for watching this video. I appreciate it. Please subscribe to watch more in the future. If you like the video, I would appreciate a thumbs up. If you like this content, you can go to my website, robotpencil.net, where you can find mentorships, tutorials, and a Patreon to get more exclusive content. Thanks again, and I'll see you guys in my next videos.